everybody. Put your hands together. Welcome back to Irving.
Yes, hello. May I ask you what your current view of what's called the Holocaust is? The extent of it?
Very tricky question.
Yes.
Because it's the kind of question that the enemy would like to get on tape, and my answer. But I will tell you very briefly, I'm writing the biography of Heinrich Himmler at this present. If you break up what is called the Holocaust into three or four separate elements, then you have the original element, which is the police operations on the Eastern Front and in Poland, which are regular police operations, the kind which occur in any military conflict. And then you have the second phase, which is the more ethnic cleansing kind of operation being carried out by Heinrich Himmler to tackle the problem of Judea, which is what I've decided to call it in my biography. It's the original problem began for the Germans in 1933 with the famous headline in the Daily Express, Sunday Express, Judea declared war on Germany. And this is basically the German response. They're getting rid of the problem once and for all, with Heinrich Himmler under various guises, liquidating the Jews, both the enemy Jews and the German Jews, throughout 1942 and 1943. We know that went on because of the intercepted messages. The intercepted messages of the SS leave no doubt at all that very large numbers were dealt with. It's possible that certain people in the SS may have been exaggerating, but not significantly. And in 1942 and 1943, in the four camps, Operation Reinhard on the Eastern Front, along the River Brook, named the camps known as Sobibor, Belzec, Majdanek, and Treblinka. The police chief in Lublin, a man called Odilo Glavoshnik, who deserves far more attention from the history books than Adolf Eichmann and small characters like that, he was liquidating a total of 1.25 million in 1942 and probably about the same number in 1943. So they got about 2.8 million in those two operations. Add to that the shootings on the Eastern Front and in Poland in the previous years, and finally the liquidation of the Jews in Slovakia and Hungary in 1944. And you come to a figure that's, give or take, close to the figure that the Jews themselves now spout. I think it's interesting that they don't like anybody who tries to suggest the Jews had it coming to them as a counter-operation to the boycott operation which they started in 1933 and everything since then, the assassination of the top masters and so on. You never hear them talking about the causes of the Holocaust. They only ever talk about the numbers, the figures, the places, the locations. But beyond that, I won't say anything.
How many died as a result of war?
Yeah, well, ultimately fighting against the Germans.
Certainly, how many died in Russia? What were the Soviet losses in World War II?
25 million? 25 million?
That's pretty accurate. Von Weizsäcker, the German president, about 10 years ago, he said 20 million. Any advance on 20 million? The actual number will shock you. In July the 18th, 1945, Churchill and Stalin were meeting for a private dinner in Potsdam, and Stalin, who had no perceptible reason to minimize the figures, told Churchill, "We have lost in missing and dead in World War II 5 million German Soviet citizens. Up to 5 million have been lost or killed in this war." The figure was taken down by the British interpreter, a man called Major Birse, B-I-R-S-E. It's been used on several occasions since then. I'm putting it in my book on Churchill, on volume 3. but the figures tend to kind of multiply these enormous kind of monopoly game that people play with numbers. This is one of the cases where Stalin himself put forward a very low number at a time when what one would have expected him to exaggerate, because the discussion was about German Soviet entitlement to reparations and damages.
I've got a question. After the Berlin Wall came down, there were several young street-level neo-Nazi leaders who were shot dead. And the explanation by the government was that favourite Secret Service excuse, criminal violence. Shortly after that, Michael Coonan died while being held in a police cell overnight, and the explanation was AIDS. What are your views on these deaths?
Well, Michael Coonan certainly was suffering from AIDS. I'm not the insider on that, so I've got no information above and beyond that. In 1989, the German government was very much in a state of flux. They certainly wouldn't have tried to promote the neo-Nazis. They have a neo-Nazi problem, which they're imagining much of the time, I think.
You don't think that perhaps Mossad would have been involved in those shootings?
I don't like to speculate. I deal in facts, often hard won and otherwise trivial. I don't like to speculate. Yes?
You touched quite a lot on your talk about aspects of the development of the National Socialist Party. Is there any lesson you think nationalists could learn today, either good lessons or negative lessons about that? Or do you think that the particular development of the National Socialist Workers' Party is like historic specific and there's little to teach us in modern day Britain?
Well, I think that the trouble with nationalist movements is that they focus around one leader. And a lot depends on the character of the leader. I think you'll find that in the case of Adolf Hitler, he wasn't a very good judge of character, and he had surrounded himself with a lot of old guard leaders like Julia Schaub, and people like that. People knew him and they say, well, he's a nice enough guy, but he's not exactly in the right position at present. Like David Cameron, I think he's surrounded himself with homosexuals. And I think it's always going to be a problem with the present Conservative government. They're not conservative in the true sense of the word, and they're not normal. That's why they push through this gay marriage legislation and things like that. It depends on who you choose as the leader and how straight he is.
Rommel, sorry.
The Nazis in Hitler are demonized in the media all the time. Even the latest ones like Hitler's fetish for poo porn.
I think the media are on a losing track here.
Yeah.
I think, as I've already said, they're already vanishing up their own arseholes, so to speak.
So how does it feel having decades of work behind you to have these so-called journalists write this rubbish constantly, and having more people arguably believe that than what they would if they bought your books?
I think that, as I say, they're losing because the Daily Mail, for example, they're constantly fastening on the wrong stories and very easily shown up as being false. And I think eventually the falsehoods will outweigh all the truth that they propagate. I'm very confident in that respect. Otherwise, I would be writing that all day long to the newspapers. I may be wrong, but that's my view. I think that by their lies you shall know them. In Germany they're referred to as the Lügenpresse, and large areas of the British press are regarded now as the lying press also. The only trouble is a lot of the damage they do is irreversible. Like I would like to know Hoover's inflicted immigration on the British people, on the English people. We were never asked. It happened in the 1950s, and onwards since then. At no time were we ever asked. We've been asked about other things like the European Union since then, but not about some of the grievous things that have changed the face of the British people, which I think personally were done in the interest of big business. But big business is not the English. And their interests don't always run parallel to those of the English people. That's my personal opinion, yes.
Do you think there's any political solution to this present predicament? I personally doubt. I'm looking for a deeper spiritual solution.
Well, the present predicament, I think, is having David Cameron as the Prime Minister. And I basically am conservative, I'm right-wing, but I'm deeply shocked by David Cameron and all his gang, and I just wonder why the English people put up with it. And the answer isn't Nicola Sturgeon.
But is the ballot box relevant?
Well, I think the English people will gradually realise that the ballot box is not the answer to them. But not this year, not for another 10 years. Yes, not in my time, yes. Yes, who else? Yes, yes.
Just wondering what motivates you to keep fighting on, because your life's, they've tried to destroy your life, so to speak, so I just wonder why do you keep...
Oh, I'm fighting on just to annoy them. My joy in when Deborah Lipstadt came back 2 or 3 years later and fought in the High Court demanding that all my possessions should be turned over to her. And we had then once again a legal stage known as discovery. Discovery is when the other side has to open up all their letters to you, whether they like it or not. And there was a letter from her lawyers to somebody else saying David Irving we tried to destroy him, but he's back again, he's publishing books, he's speaking, he's up and down the country, he's going around this country and the United States and elsewhere, and he's speaking again, and he's there all over again. And that was, to me, a great admission of victory. It's a Pyrrhic victory, but on the other hand, they can afford it. Her case cost her $13 million, which she lost. She didn't get a penny back because she wasn't entitled to her costs. So it's a Pyrrhic victory. Once you've realised that you're not going to win in the long run in this world, then you can fight, which is what I've done. Yes. As long as you fight clean and satisfied, yes.
In Europe or out, which is the best for the country?
What do you say?
Out.
In Europe,
Right, out. I've been working for many years on a manuscript offered by another author called Mark Deven. Do you know where he is now? Mark Deven?
Ah, he's in Germany.
Is he?
Teaching in Germany, yeah.
He's written a very good book called Macmillan's Hidden Agenda. And I'm tempted now to rush out in the next 3 months this book.
Please do.
Because it goes right back to how Edward Heath met with the foreigners, met with Germany and France, and said that what I'm doing would count as treason in Britain, because I'm selling out Britain and British sovereignty in return for promises. And this must not be known, must not ever be known. And Mark Deven actually has the documents from Edward Heath's papers and the foreign papers. The trouble is, Mark Deven can't really write, can he?
He wrote a very good booklet called Who Controls Our Mass Media.
Yeah.
Remember that one, the yellow one with a black question mark on the front?
Well, there we are.
That would be a very relevant book to release just now.
Would be very. It's a question of allocating scarce resources. No scarcer resource in your time when you're writing. I write from 7 in the morning until late at night every day, 7 days a week. This is a very serious consideration whether I have to look at the Mark Deven book or go ahead and publish it or what.
you need 1 day off a week.
Do you think that a correct or better understanding of the true nature of the Second World War would have a significant effect on the current political climate, or do you think it's too far in the past? No, the Second World War, a more accurate
The Second World War
understanding of it.
Immense cost in human life. I'm reminded of the French author Anatole de France, who went to, in one of his novels, he has his hero going to the emperor and says, and the emperor saying, well, do you have an estimate of how much this war is going to cost? And the hero saying, well, it's going to cost so many million francs. And the emperor then saying to him, yes, but does that well, you just think of the human life this is going to cost. Oh, that's included in the estimate. That's included in the financial estimate. And I'm always thinking of that. Someone like Winston Churchill, he has not considered how much human life he's taking on both sides in fighting his wars for whatever reason he fought. But people like him really don't take human life into consideration.
So is that yes, you think it would significantly change the present climate of opinion?
Well, the opinion about whom?
Well, I suppose about the nature of what it is to be Britain, given the fact of the Second World War, because a lot of the myths about it seem to define Britain, and people always,
Well, my next speaking tour, I'm going to be speaking on Adolf Hitler's peace offers and Britain's response to them. And then you realise how shallow was our war effort, our war aims. Winston Churchill never spelled out his war aims. He threw away everything for nothing. This occasionally becomes plain when Morgenthau comes to speak to him about in August 1944 and says to him, Mr. Prime Minister, how are you going to explain to the English people that they have bankrupted Britain and the British Empire in fighting this war? And Churchill's response was, that is a doleful task which I propose to leave to my successor. Clement Attlee, which never did.
So was Churchill, what was the reason Churchill did this stupid, crazy thing? Was he bribed? Was he blackmailed? Was he bullied? Was he brainwashed?
Oh, he was originally bribed in 1936 by Robert Whaley Cohen. I've got a photocopy of my Churchill Volume 1. Cohen there. And having accepted the bribe, he told himself that the war was good for himself, that the war was now had a purpose. But eventually he realized that he was fighting for nothing at all, fighting as Whaley Cohen in the book. He looks the part. He put up £48,000 of his money at that time as a gift to Churchill, which is about £2 million in present currency. And he paid the money on behalf of the Jewish community to Winston Churchill, who until that day, had not spoken a word against Hitler. Churchill finds everything bad about Hitler. Hitler could never understand why Churchill was doing it. It's difficult even now for us to understand that. He fought on doggedly then for 6 years, digging himself into a deeper and deeper and deeper hole, out of which Britain is still trying to climb. 50, 60, 70 years later. He's dominated my life, dominated the life of a lot of people in this room, the mess that he created. But he's still treated by the media as being Britain's great hero. That is baffling to me.
Do you not think that was a great deal to do with the Holocaust and how it's been portrayed? The fact that we fought a war for nothing is why that they've built the Holocaust up so much, to say that it was a good war, that this is the evil that you were fighting.
Justified.
Do you know, I think why that's such a powerful thing in the media.
I remember when I was very young, 1947, going for a walk in the Isle of Wight on the seashore in Sandow with my mother and my twin brother. And we, two little boys, we both had our ribs showing through our chests. We had very little to eat. My mother saying, "You two boys look like Belsen children." I didn't know what a Belsen child was. But you're right, I mean, they published photographs in 1945, Belsen, which turns out to have been, subsequently, they had the hero of Belsen who died 2 or 3 days ago in his obituary, with photographs, Captain Leonard something or other, a Jew, who became the commandant of Belsen, and then went on to a great Jewish life of fraud and scams and conning people out of their money. That came out in a later article, not in the Daily Mail, though. Everything he got up to, which is exactly what Judea was about in Henry's eyes.
I've just started reading a book about Alfred Rosenberg.
Yes.
And I wanted to know if you have an opinion on him, Have you met any of his met family members?
Well, firstly, Alfred Rosenberg is an immensely boring writer who would not hesitate to write Hitler a 20-page letter setting out his views in the middle of the war, as though Hitler had nothing else to work on. He was appointed Minister of the occupied Eastern Territories, and he wrote a diary. The diary was in his possession when he was actually hidden behind a wall, which the Americans found, and they were taken into the document center in Nuremberg. And it was then stolen by an American lawyer called Robert M.W. Kempner, who became one of the chief prosecutors at Nuremberg. I knew Kempner. I questioned him at the time. I said, "Have you got the rest of the Rosenberg diary?" He said, "No, he hadn't." But we historians knew that he had it because he occasionally quoted passages from the Rosenberg diary which were not in the published text. The clock moves on. Kempner died alone in Philadelphia, and his entire household was cleaned out by the Holocaust Museum, and everything left in his house was sold off to a waste paper collector called Martin, Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin found there lots of papers about Kempner and Rosenberg. And Kempner, being a good collector, then he searched the internet for details about Rosenberg and Kempner, and he came across my website. That's one of the advantages of the internet. And he phoned me, and he said he'd found 300 boxes of papers on Kempner's porch, which he had bought. He had the legal right to. Anyway, he had the Rosenberg diary. The Rosenberg diary had been given away to Kempner's girlfriend, who gave it to her boyfriend living in northern New York State, where I'd always suspected it was there. I put in fact, enough information on my website to locate that diary. The diary has now been seized by the Holocaust Museum. Oh yes, seized by the Holocaust Museum, but rejected by them. Having got it, they decided not to publish it because it contains not a word about the Jews. Quite extraordinary. But I've been very grateful and very useful for me in my book on Heinrich Himmler, which I've used a great deal. The Rosenberg diary.
So is it worth continuing reading it then? The book I've got.
The Rosenberg diary.
No, it's that. Well, yeah.
Well, the Rosenberg diary was eventually published by the Holocaust Museum, but you've got to have sufficient patience to relog for every page of the diary. It's not easy to read. But a book about him was written about 10 or 20 years ago by Anne something or other. She collaborated with me on him and gave her a lot of assistance. And that's sunk into this very learned book. Rosenberg, unfortunately, does not inspire regular books, designed to be read by ordinary people.
But it was hung.
Was hung for writing a book, or?
He was hanged.
He was hanged, sorry.
Hanged. You hung pictures, you hanged men.
Thanks, like
He was hanged for writing a book, basically.
Well, one of the where you say to yourself, what was he hanged for? Another one was Julius Streicher. Another one was Fritz Sauckel, who was Hitler's manpower commissioner in charge of manpower. If Albert Speer was let off with a slap on the wrist, then Fritz Sauckel would be hanged, or Julius Streicher, what are you hanging him for? He published magazines until 1940, Der Stürmer, which was not a very nice magazine, with anti-Semitic cartoons. The anti-Semitic cartoons turned out to have been painted by a Jew called Koch. Not many people know that. It's not my taste. There we are. Nuremberg, there was a lot of hanky-panky, yes.
Which Holocaust museum? There seems to be hundreds of them. The last time I was in Glasgow, I went into the big museum at Kelvinside, the big national, and there was a Holocaust display. The last time I was at my old health centre in Ireland, I walked in and there was a Holocaust display with pictures and chimneys and everything. Everywhere you go, there's Holocaust museums. Which one?
You're right. There's one of the few countries in the world where that is the case. The Holocaust museums belong in Germany and they belong in possibly in the United States. There's a very good Holocaust museum in Washington where they have excellent collections. They've got a lot of Heinrich Himmler's stolen photographs from photographic albums and things which are stolen from his home. And the Holocaust Museum gave me a lot of help, and they said they'll copy any photographs that I want. But they at the same time said, please don't mention this to his daughter, Gudrun Himmler, because strictly speaking, all this is hers. I mean, she's not the kind of person who's going to demand it all back, but that was the attitude. The Holocaust, the Himmler materials, the personal materials, you cannot seize. So, under the Hague rules of land warfare, private goods are private goods and they can't be seized. So they were not going to return to her. But I've got everything that matters. Yeah. The Holocaust museums in London and elsewhere, there's a whole wing of the Imperial War Museum. You think to yourself, what's this got to do with the Imperial War Museum? It's frightening. I think it's David Cameron who's eager to butter up his Jewish donors, who are manifold, but they're no concern of us ordinary people.
They're building a new one in Westminster. They're building a new Holocaust museum or a monument or something in Westminster by the Houses of Parliament.
Well, eventually people will rise up against this kind of nonsense.
It's the Holocaust now has got its own thing in school. They get a whole section.
That's right.
On the Holocaust. Yes. My daughter came home the other day and she said, Dad, why did Hitler hate the Jews?
Well,
so she's already done it.
It's Holocaustianity. It's replaced Christianity.
I remember when I was young, there was the penny coin. The penny coin had impressed around the rim Latin. Do you remember the Latin abbreviations that were impressed around the rim of the penny coin? Def Int Imp. Defender of the Faith, Empress of India. But now I think the Defender of the Faith, Prince Charles said, well, actually, I interpret that as being Defender of the Faiths.
Faiths, plural.
In the plural.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the plural when I was young. I remember when I was born. It wasn't in the plural when I was young. That's what he should be defending the faith. Should be saying, okay, we welcome all these Muslim guests, these tourists to our country, but the faith of Britain is the Christian faith, and we will adhere to that. And that's what he should say. And that's what I call defending the faith. But I dare say he's been advised otherwise by his diplomatic advisors, who for some reason are anxious not to offend the Muslims. I mean, have you noticed how the BBC for a long time, they said Islamists, the Islamists? Islamist isn't in my dictionary. What Islamist is that separates him or her from a Muslim. These things, yes.
What's your view on Rommel?
Rommel. That's like being asked where I stand on Christianity.
Yeah.
I've written a book on Rommel, which you haven't got it. It's actually on.
Which view?
Well, famous film starring James Mason spends half the film, more than half the film, going on about how he was a traitor to Hitler, how he was a good guy in the Allied terms, a traitor to Hitler. Was he really a traitor to Hitler?
No, that film was shown actually in every cinema in Stuttgart when his son Manfred Rommel was, as he told me, he said he had that film shown in every cinema in Stuttgart. But my book quite clearly establishes that he wasn't a traitor, that he was totally unaware of the plot, and that his name was very sadly misused by those who were traitors and decided that they would drag him one or two good names to show how good they were.
So the film needs remake.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming, ladies and gentlemen.